As you can tell, I am not Kelvin Chin. But we'll hear from him in just a minute. I'm Mark Wilson, and 63 years ago, my family moved to Norwood from Connecticut. And I went into the 6th grade at Cleveland School, and who was a classmate? Kelvin Chin. So we go way back. And how far back we can discuss that privately, okay? But I'm delighted to be here to introduce Kelvin, give you some quick background on him, and then we'll just turn him loose. The plan, though, is that he will speak for the first half hour or so, and then the second half will be opened up for questions from people. There's a lot of you here, and so we want to give you a chance to get your questions and comments answered and asked. You'll notice, too, we have a little laptop set up here. Kelvin streams his things live because he has a global audience of people that he deals with. So this makes it available to them live, and it's recorded also, so they can write in with questions and things. We won't take any of those questions now, but any questions you have, we get addressed. He can do that privately later online with them. So Kelvin Chin. Actually, we also, could I just ask, how many people from the Norwood High School class of '69 are here? Not bad. Okay, well, welcome, kind of a special welcome to classmates of ours. And we do have Norwood school royalty here, Paul Alberta. Who was music director anywhere, and someone who was actually a very big influence on Kelvin's life, going through really 7th grade, junior high, and high school.
Right.
Okay, so quickly about Kelvin. He was our class valedictorian for the class of '69. Went on to Dartmouth College and got his bachelor's degree there in French, a little bit of psychology. Went from there to Yale University and got a master's degree in East Asian languages. Hadn't had enough of schooling at that point, so he then went to Boston College Law School and got his law degree. So very accomplished academic individual, and a heck of a nice guy to hang around with. Okay. During that time, though, and he then moved on into the corporate world doing corporate legal work. Spent some time with the American Arbitration Association, arbitrating labor disputes and agreements, and mediations. And at the same time, from the time he graduated from Dartmouth on, he also became a global instructor in transcendental meditation. I can tell you, I have been through his meditation course. It's fabulous. I had tried meditating before, it didn't work. With him, it worked. Okay, and I do that daily now. And so from there, his career has just expanded. He's got a couple of nonprofit foundations now that he runs, focused around death and dying. And his first book, his books are available here, by the way. I'll be selling them afterwards. It's about a 50% discount off what Amazon would charge you. So it's $10 per book. And if you use a credit card, that's cash. If it's credit card, it's $12. Okay, so you can see me afterwards over there, and he'll be glad to sign the books. Okay, if I missed anything.
That's good. You hit all the points.
We find another 20 libraries. Well, I'll have this down.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's thank you, Mark. Well, as Mark said, I'll be hanging around afterwards and signing books if anybody wants to pick up a book, or I don't know if anybody brought a book. Anybody bring a book? Oh, you did, so I can sign your book. So great to be here. Just a quick question, how along the book thing, how many people have read any of my books already? Yeah, so a bunch of people have read some of my books. Okay, good. So I have 3 books out there. So as Mark said, this is the Overcoming the Fear of Death book. And it's the subtitle is Through Each of the 4 Main Belief Systems. They're not religious beliefs. So those of you kind of know me, how many people went to the first congregational church? Anybody go to the first congregation where they're going? How many of you guys went to church with me? Like, Pete, Pete, I met Bobby there, right? Your brother Bobby Lindforth. Bob and I have been friends since what, I was 4 years old or something, because of Sunday school, basically. He went to the Winslow, I went to the Cleveland. So I take a non-religious approach, even though I grew up here in Norwood, as you heard, and congregational church, Christian upbringing, et cetera, but I take a non-religious approach because, as Mark mentioned, I have clients in 64 students in 64 countries now worldwide. And so I cut across all different religions, cultures, you name it. I have students I've taught who are clergy of all of the major religions you can think of, priests, Catholic priests, nuns, every form of Christian minister or whatever, on the Protestant side of things, Muslims, rabbis, who am I leaving out? Buddhist monks. I've taught Buddhist monks to meditate. What are they doing? What do you think they're doing in the monastery all day? Meditating, right? Well, but they've come to me and I've taught them the technique that I teach, which we're not going to get into great detail tonight. We have different topics, but just a quick overview. It's very easy, no focusing, no controlling. So they would come and they come from their Buddhist, as obviously, background, and they're doing their Buddhist meditation. And I am an inclusive guy. So it's like, I don't tell them, don't do that. No, I say, just do whatever, and then do what I teach you. Don't mix the two. You don't get confused, right? And they do mine first, the technique that I teach first, and then, they do theirs. What are they doing at the monastery? Meditating all day. So they're doing their thing all day, and they do mine every once in a while, and it just helps their process. They've all come back and told me that makes it easier for them to meditate. By the way, the 4 belief systems, I'm not going to describe them. I'm going to say, just tell you what the 4 belief systems are, because it's not religious beliefs. The first one is the science belief. That was, those of you, a lot of you knew my dad. My dad was an engineer, right? Science belief, that's the science belief. No afterlife, don't believe in an afterlife. That's it, one body, boom, mind, brain, connected. That's it, right? My dad, Mark, you've probably heard my dad say that. Well, I don't know if we ever talked to my dad about death, Mark, but if you did, he would say, stick me in a box, throw the dirt at me, I'm done. That's the science, okay? My dad's version of how to say it. The second belief system that exists in the world, again, these are underlying all of the religious beliefs out there, somewhere in the spectrum. The second one is fear of continued existence. So they believe in a continuation of some form mentally after you physically, biologically die. But there's fear, and the fear could be from all kinds of different stuff, different sources of fear, et cetera, but there's fear. So I help people get over that too. The third belief system that exists out there is, I believe in an afterlife of some sort. And again, depending on where you come from, Nirvana, if you're Buddhist, Valhalla, if you're Scandinavian, if you're into ancient Greece and Rome, it's Elysium, but Christians and Muslims and so forth, it's heaven, right? So belief in an afterlife, but no fear. That's the third. The fourth belief system is reincarnation, past lives. We can continue, come back in another body, physical, biological body if you want to. You can choose to do that, et cetera. We're going to be talking more about that one tonight. Right? So those are the 4 belief systems. So I help people get over their fears about death and dying. That's one of my foundations. And that's the focus of that particular book, my first book on overcoming the fear of death. But it's also, I've done a lot of healthcare seminars, workshops for healthcare workers, and they may or may not have a fear that they're worried about getting over, but it helps them talk to people who aren't of their belief system, right? So they may believe in this, or they may believe in one of those 4, or they may be a fence sitter. You can be a hybrid person, sometimes a little bit of this, a little bit of that one, right? But they're talking to a patient or somebody or a colleague who doesn't believe the way they do. And the book helps give them tips on how to talk to other people. So that's the first book. This is the second book. I came here. Anybody here from my talk here that we did? Well, how many people were here for this talk? I did this talk, I think it was 2017, right? Yeah. Mary Paz, thank you, Mary Paz. my co-editor of the high school yearbook, Mary Paz, thank you very much. Give her an applause for that. Yes, Mary Paz, and but she set up the first talk, and then I came back a few years later, 4 years later maybe, and I talked about this is my 2021 book. So this is a collection of 67 essays on all kinds of stuff. And I know how many people have read this one? I'm just curious. Yeah, a bunch of you. So this is on ideas about how to live life better with less suffering, more ease, happiness, clearing up concepts that we have about things like forgiveness. That's what I came and talked about here, if you were here at that talk here. Forgiveness, and how can you love somebody who's hurt you, and how can you forgive that person? All of those, because those are thorny issues, right? They don't seem to go together a lot of times. So we talked about that. That's one of the essays, a couple of the essays in here about that, about love, spirituality. What does that mean? There's a chapter on meditation principles in here, spiritual insecurity. I'm just glancing at titles here that are coming up. The fear of uncertainty, suffering and happiness. There's a chapter in here on emotions, and there's a chapter here on life principles, and there's a chapter on meditation, and there's a chapter on spiritual stuff. Okay, so there's a bunch of different categories of essays, and some of the essays are 1 page long. I mean, some of them are literally that long. That's it. You see I yellow and underline everything. And I wrote the book. Still trying to figure stuff out. Anyway, I wrote it. Anyway, so that's my second book. And then this is the book we're going to focus more on topics around and outside of this book. So I'm not only going to talk about this book tonight. I'm going to talk more generally about the afterlife. And as Mark was saying earlier, some of you, and maybe not even class of 69, I ran into some folks in class of 71, class of 74, whatever. You may know of me, or may have known me, we may have been friends from elementary school, Cleveland Elementary, junior high school, or high school here in Norwood. Some of you don't know me. And even the ones who know me, when you hear some of the stuff I'm going to tell you, you're going to go like, who is that guy up there? I mean, his name is Kelvin. The name sounds familiar, but and to be honest, I've asked myself those kind of questions for the last 50 years since these experiences that we're going to talk about tonight have started opening up with me. As I said, mainly we're going to discuss ideas out of this book. And I want to leave lots of time for Q&A afterwards. So I'm going to do like 4 bullet points here really fast. So he told you already, I learned to meditate. I was 19 years old, stressed out, not into spiritual stuff. If you had asked me when I was 19 years old at Dartmouth, I was a sophomore at Dartmouth, stressed out. If you ask me, like, are you into spirituality? Is that why you learn to meditate? I said, spirituality, what's that? Spirits? Ghosts? What the heck does that mean? Or no, I said, no, I stopped going to church a long time. That's how I thought of spirituality, right? I was so naive to what spirituality meant. I was science. I started about pre-med psych, and then I changed to French. Okay, so yeah, go figure. But that's why I learned to meditate. I learned TM, as Mark said. I studied personally with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in 1971 and 73. You probably heard his name. He taught the Beatles to meditate in 67. I learned in 1970. I was an international leader in his organization for about 10 years. The organization went this way, and I said, no, I don't want to get into all this other stuff. I want to stay focused on meditation, and I left. So now what I teach, I call it turning within meditation. So I do my own. I've removed all the cultural stuff. It doesn't look Indian at all, because if it did, I wouldn't be able to teach Muslims. So if those of you don't know, they don't really see eye to eye. Anyway, so I teach across all cultures. I've made the whole teaching of the process secular, right? Not religious in the association. So I've been teaching, you do the math, I've been teaching for 50 years now, 1973 to present. I've been meditating for 52 years now. Another bullet point that will be material for you to understand when we start talking about experiences. In 1977, out of the blue, and I mean out of the blue, and I'll tell you what happened when it first started happening. I started having past life memories, out of the blue. I didn't even believe in past lives. I didn't believe in reincarnation. I was a science-minded person, right? It's just like, what? And I'll tell you how that happened. And then in 1986, I started spontaneously. I've never had a past life regression, if you know what that is. Nobody's ever walked, it's just like, whoop. And then 1986, started communicating with the other side. I'm like, what? Communicating with the other side. At first, I thought it was like going a little cuckoo. I thought, like, am I making this up? You know? So anyway, that's the overview. And one other point I want to mention to you, a very important point. Whenever I say this to I always say this to my students. You're going to hear me talking about experiences. I'll say this, I've been on 100 podcast interviews so far. So I always say this at some point. You hear my experiences. I am not asking people to believe what I am saying. I'm asking, in fact, I tell my students, I want you to question what I'm saying, because I think questioning is really the step to really owning whatever you're understanding. Because if you don't understand, if you just blindly believe what somebody says, you don't really own it, right? I think that's my phone. You want to turn the you turn the ringer off, Mark. I think I forgot to turn it off. Sorry about that.
There's a problem with the streaming.
What's that? Are you serious?
No, I'm serious.
What's going on?
I don't know. I was given a message out back that someone was trying to log into the live stream.
Well, it's working right here. Tell them to, whenever you have, just a little tip for everybody, including anybody who's live streaming right now, is whenever you have a problem with live streaming, you need to leave the app and go back in. You need to reset because there's something glitching in your device or your Wi-Fi or something. Anyway, because I can see that it's working here. Anyway, very important to question is what I was saying, okay? Somebody has experiences, Kelvin Chin's telling you experience. These are my experiences. These are not your experiences, right? So how do we, and I talk about this in my third book, this notion of experiences and then interpretation of the experience is going through my filter. You're hearing what I'm saying, okay, fine, but you need to filter what I'm saying because it's going through my filter. And what informs my filter is my previous experiences, obviously, and my belief systems that have come about as a result of that. It's not just about afterlife stuff, it's about anything in life, politics, education, music. Think about any subject you want to. Everything is filtered through our experiences and the beliefs that we created around that, right? So I'd say that to you. So you always have that going on in your mind whenever you hear me or anybody else, especially people who are talking about spiritual stuff. Because for the most part, people's knee jerk, which is a mistake, is to blindly believe what everybody says, okay? Here's what I tell my students. Ask yourself, how reliable is the evidence sound that they're giving you? All right? Question it. How reliable? The more reliable the evidence seems to be to back it up, then the more you're gonna, okay, that kind of makes sense to me. And the second point is, does it make sense to you? So two things, reliable evidence, does it make sense? Logically, rationally, okay? So you'll see when we get into the Q&A, I may point out some things to you of how some people think about this point or that point and where the thinking is off. Because I've been thinking about this stuff, I've realized, for a long time. My memories go back 6,000 years now, about 24 lifetimes. Now, that doesn't mean that I've had 24 lifetimes over the 6,000 years. I have memories from about 24 lifetimes, and they go back to about 6,000 years. We can talk about how do you figure out it was 6,000, how do you know that that one was this one from that time period or whatever. There are ways to kind of triangulate and figure these things out. But what I want to do, I was talking to a few of you before we started, again, because I wanted to cover a whole bunch of points with you and then open it up for Q&A. I'm just going to hit some bullet points with you and answer some questions quickly. And you guys come back to me in the Q&A, say, hey, could you talk more about that or whatever, okay? Because I want this to address needs that you have. You can read my books, you know, but I'm here live. So ask me, I want you to give you time to ask me stuff. So what happens after we biologically die? Right, that's one of the questions in the blurb and from the library. What happens after we biologically die? My experience, and this is based on experience, it's not based on reading books or watching YouTube videos. This is my experience is that our mind continues and our body biologically dies. Now, when I say mind, you can substitute soul, spirit, consciousness, whatever. I'm teaching across so many countries that sometimes English is their second, third, fourth language. So I'd like to use simple English. But when I'm using the word mind, I don't just mean the word mind that's looking at this piece of paper up here right now, or the mind that's making decisions about what I'm saying. I'm talking about that plus this, right? My expanded sense of consciousness. That to me is mind, my mind, okay? So our mind and our bodies are distinct and different. Well, when the biological body dies, the mind continues. That's my experience. And it's also borne out by the first law of thermodynamics, if you want to rely on one of the laws and so forth. Again, I'm not beating the drum totally that we have any clear scientific explanations for this stuff, because we don't yet. But I hope we do. And I'm, you know, and I'm one of a number of people encouraging our scientists to think more, look into these things about consciousness. It's still not clear. We cannot prove. This goes to the idea of proof. It's a great word to use when you're talking about afterlife and death and so forth to people. I can prove to you that's heaven. You know, no, you can't. You can't really prove it in a mathematical, scientific way. You cannot. Okay. Sometimes you'll hear people using the term quantum mechanics. So quantum mechanics is a theory. Okay, it's a mathematical probability theory. It's not meant to explain reality. Okay, but you know, I don't want to, you know, go too far into that, down that rabbit hole. But what is heaven like? Okay, this question, what is heaven like? Well, it's quite simply, heaven is a place of light. And you've probably heard this from other spiritual teachers or religious leaders, and that's my experience. That is a place of light, because if you think about it, if your biological body dies and your mind continues, what is continuing? It's not your flesh, obviously. It's your energy. Your mind is energetic. It's energy. It's an energy form. That's what the soul is a form of energy. Well, that's what's going to continue. So you got a whole bunch of beings on the other side who've left their biological bodies behind, and they're still existing. Okay, so let's talk about this. Do we remember who we are when we're still existing? Yes. Short answer, yes. And a term I coined, I call it, we retain ourselves, our individuality, and our memory of who we are, and our knowledge of who we are. As the phrase I use is identifiable energy pattern. We are an identifiable energy pattern after we die. And we are now too. I mean, sometimes people can, you know, identify me by my voice or whatever, or sometimes, you know, you've had this experience even before anybody has biologically died. They'll walk into a room and you can kind of feel their presence, and you can kind of feel who it is. Is it your 2-year-old grandchild, or is it your wife, or is it your daughter, your son or daughter? You can feel their presence sometimes. Those of you who are a little bit more sensitive, you know what I'm talking about, right? That's before you die. Well, after you die, we retain this very clear, I call it an energy, almost like an energy signature. For those of you who know anything about flying planes, it's like a transponder. You know, it's like you have that. And whether I see John on the other side, and whether he looks like John, who I know from this side, I will recognize his energy. Okay, there's something identifiable about that. But the other thing that continues after we biologically die is our personalities. So that uniqueness about ourselves, when I say personalities, What are the traits that, what makes you tick? How come you really like that and you don't like this? And there's something, or there's something that you really drives you almost emotionally. It's like subconscious. It's not an intellectual thought. It's just, well, that's the way I am, that those personality traits continue. And we'll talk more about that, at the end of our discussion before I open up the Q&A. Okay. Do we meet our loved ones yet again? Yes. We meet our loved ones again, yes, if we want to, because people have asked me, what if I don't want to run into that? Right? Yeah, I'm that jerk again. No, I left him behind and I am happy, or her, she, he, whoever, right? Yeah, and so you don't have to, there's no have to's. That's the thing. You don't have to be with them. You don't have to work it out with them. It's all free will. What does free will mean? Personal choice. You can choose to, I choose to, but that's my choice. Nobody's making you. Okay. So, I mean it seriously. You can, and then on the other side, you can leave really fast because your energy, remember your energy, don't need a car, don't need even a bicycle, you don't need an airplane, you can really fast. Okay. These other questions that we put in the blurb. What do we do there? How long do we stay there? Can we come back to Earth? If so, when and how? What's a soul plan? Let me cover that. I want to cover those several bullet points in the next section where we talk a little bit more about this book. First of all, I never thought I'd be talking about this stuff publicly. And you can kind of read between the lines. Those of you who have this book already, you can see it in this section. I say with affection, okay. And one of the groups of people who I thank here, I'll just read it to you. To my closest friends and family who honored my request to keep my memories to themselves for decades, because I never thought, I didn't plan on talking about this stuff. Like I told you, it started opening up for me in 1977. I just thought, oh, I'll talk to my friend George. I tell my kids about it, once they were born, whatever, and before I get married to somebody, I'll let her know, like, hey, this guy, So it's full disclosure, right? And so she's like going, yeah, I'm out of here. I give opportunity, right? I just give her notice. But recently, why am I talking about this? Because, as Mark said, I have this foundation, Overcoming the Fear of Death. So that I started making that my focus. And just in a quick nutshell, Mark, and a number of you knew my mom, Pete, you knew my mom. She died tragically, 1982. That's what got me into helping people, because I needed help when my mom died suddenly, right? She was in her 50s. And so my third year of law school, very young. And so that's how I got into this. I back-ended into helping people with this in this area. But that's why I started the foundation, so forth, and I started helping people more, even though I was starting to help people in the 80s and 90s. But it was nights and weekends, it's just a side thing. Now I've been doing it full time for the last 10 years, since I left corporate and legal and stuff. But yeah, here we are talking about it today because I'm trying to help people reduce their fears and anxieties about death and dying so that they can live life more fully. That's the bottom line, right? That's the bottom line. So to be honest, I don't care if people believe I'm crazy because I thought I was at one point too. So yeah, welcome to the club. But it's not, I'm not here to convince people of my memories of being accurate or not. I'm here to help people learn how to discern and distinguish amongst experiences and what's real and what seems not to be. And there's never a clear line there. How do you know this wasn't your imagination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's no mathematical proofs to this stuff, okay? But there are ways, and I talk about it in here, how to assess things, okay? I want to talk, before I talk a little bit about some of my past lives, let me just say this. How many people have ever had a deja vu experience? Yeah, almost everybody, right? So, it's like, think about deja vu. It's like you're sitting there, you're like, wait a minute, Mark, we were talking about this before. I swear, Pete, we were there, we were having this conversation. and you know you weren't, or you've been to a place and you know I'd never been there before, but you just have this. It's like, no, I've been here. That kind of knee-jerk, visceral inner feeling, deja vu. Past life memories are like deja vu on steroids. Okay, it's like, and what happens initially is something that I call recognition memories. I talk about that briefly in my first book, and I talk about it a lot in this recent book, where, you know, like I said, you go to a place, you go to North Dakota, you know, the family has never been to North Dakota. You check with your sister, Lorinda, my sister. You know, have we ever been to North Dakota? I said, no. You go to like, North Dakota and I've been here before. Something is weird about that experience. I had that experience when I went to the catacombs in Italy when I was 20 years old. I had this experience similarly when I was 5, 6 years old at the Museum of Fine Arts down on Huntington Ave. My mom used to take me down there when, imagine this, 5, 6 years old, she'd leave me in the lobby. Kelvin, I'll see you back here when Mickey's little hand was on the 11 and the big hand is on the 12. I'll see you back here in the lobby. Can you imagine? Department of Social Services today, right? Going driving downtown trying to pick me up and showing her ID to try to convince them that she's not crazy, right? So, but no, this is 1955. Right, 56. It was a different time. There was nobody in line to get into the museum. It's like, you know, the gift shop was this big, you know, literally. You know, they sold gum and a couple of postcards, and that was it. You know, gum in a museum, probably not a good idea. But anyway, they probably learned from that. But that, where did I go? Egyptian mummies and the Crusader stuff. That's where I went. I went to 2 areas, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why. Now, in retrospect, all these flooding memories about being Egyptian priests several times, I don't know, 3 or 4 times maybe, and my Crusader experience, etc., which is one of the lifetimes I have the most memories of, being in the Third Crusades. You know, now I connected the dots, right? Camp Child. Anybody here in Boy Scouts with me? Yeah, this guy. Remember Camp Child in Manamet, Massachusetts? So do you remember, Mark, the Indians, and it was, you know, you remember, I talked about that story. He just reminded me, he went like this. I tell the story, I got an axe in my foot. And I still have a scar on my big toe. It goes from here to here. It was this long, 18 stitches, 9 inside, 9 outside. So Mark was there. And I was on staff, and I was doing an Indian dance with my friend Donnie Alger. Donnie, are you watching? I tried to find Donnie. Donnie, if you see this, contact me. Anyway, my buddy Donnie, and it was called the challenge dance, and he would jump through the fire. Can you imagine? We were 15 years old. Your 15-year-old kid jumping through a bonfire. The wood is this high, so he has to make it at least that high. Otherwise, he's going to go into the fire, right? And the flames are going up probably, what are they, 10, 12 feet high? Way the heck up on this beach, right? At the Boy Scout camp. No way they would allow that today. Anyway, so Donnie takes his axe, and we did this every 2 weeks. We did this for 2 years, the same dance. And he would jump through the fire, and I'm sitting he's coming towards me, and he would bury the axe in the ground, in the sand in front of me as a challenge. It's called the challenge dance. And then I pick it up, and we do this dance, and we got drummers over here, and I'm doing the toe heel dance around. And then I hide and all this stuff. And anyway, and I kill him, and then we dance off. Well, one time he jumped too far. Yeah, so that happened. Anyway, so I have had are those precursors, are not the axe in the foot experience, but the fact that I was so drawn in and emotionally connected to all of the native ceremonies, and the 4 chiefs would come in on the canoes. You remember that? And it's pitch black, just the campfire, and then you come in from the lake 4 try to do it from 4 directions, but they just like the north, south, east, west, 4 different chiefs in full headdress. Was that emotional connection that I had? Was that part of the later memories that I started resurfacing about being a Lakota? Right? Who knows? Moonlight Serenade and In the Mood. I was talking to Paul Alberta about that. It's so great to see you again. Paul and I got together this afternoon, thanks to Mark, organized, get a coffee clatch, as they say, get together, and we were shooting the breeze about this. Was my connection with playing Moonlight Serenade with Kenny Megan in the clarinet duet in high school, or playing In the Mood, which we closed our jazz, our stage band concerts where they got a standing ovation every time, because probably 90% of the audience, our parents and their friends, grew up dancing to that in 1939 and 1940, right? And so was my current connection with those songs, is that connected to me, my lifetime as a World War II fighter pilot in the South Pacific when I was blonde, blue-eyed, and flew F-4F Wildcats off the USS Enterprise? I don't know, right? Can we prove it? No. And the last thing I mentioned is, with these, what ifs, second grade. Those of you with me in the second grade, I don't know, at Cleveland School, the teacher said, there's several of us who were kind of bored in class. So she said, hey, you can go out with Mr. Levitsky. Remember Mr. Levitsky, the art teacher for ton? Is he still around? Anyway, but whatever, Mr. Levitsky. And we created a Roman mural. It's still hanging at the Cleveland School if you go right inside. So I made that in the second grade. People there at the Cleveland School didn't even know. When I went in and talked to them, they said, the plaque fell off about 30 years ago, and the janitor threw it away, and we have no idea who made this or why this is here. I said, well, there were like half a dozen of us did that. Me and Candy, I can't remember who else was doing it. Carla Johnson, I think Dick Shea, I can't remember. These guys need to contact me and fill me in. Anyway, here's how my first past life memory. I'm just going to talk briefly about a couple things and we'll open it up. First past life memory opened up. I had a dream. I didn't know it was a past life memory. I just thought it was a bad dream. I had a really bad dream. I was emotionally really, really upset. And that was it. I chalked that up to being really emotionally upset in a really bad nightmare. Emotionally upset. 6 or 8 months later, I'm in a TM teacher kind of R&R meditation retreat in Switzerland. And we're doing these energy movement stuff, and there's kind of a room a little bit bigger than this, but 75 of us sitting on foam, just pieces of foam, doing group meditation and doing some energy movement stuff. So we're getting energy moving through our body and so forth and so on. Eyes closed, we do group meditation, and we do this energy stuff. Most of the people are hopping around, they're getting wiggly, they get energy is going, and they're at best, they're like hopping around like frogs, like cross their legs in there. I flip over on my back. I'll go like this, I flip over on my back, my feet go over, and I feel like I'm being crucified upside down. So that was my experience, and it went on every single time for, it went on for, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 months, but that was a 2-month, every day, all day meditation retreat, and it went on all day, every time I closed my eyes, it went. So now I'll go for a walk. We went for a walk. We're doing yoga and stuff, but you need to go get a little cardiovascular. So we go for a walk after meals, and I'm walking with my friend George Hammond, and George says, I start to tell him my dream. I say, I got upset in this dream, and he said, oh yeah, and this is what happened, and this is what you were wearing, and this is where you were. I said, what are you talking about? How'd you know that? He said, well, I found you. And what are you talking? I said, what are you talking about? He said, I found you 2,000 years ago. I'm the one who found you lying in the ditch on the side of the road. And so he said, you know how you've been saying you've been flipping over and you're being crucified and you're upside down and all this stuff for going on for at least 2 or 3 weeks now, every time we meditate. He said, you don't know who you are? I said, no. So he grew up Catholic. He was an altar boy. I went to First Congregational Church and didn't pay attention in Sunday school. So he knew about who that might be. And so he filled in the blank on that experience. So I've had some experiences where they're known people, but most of the 25 or 24, 25 lifetimes are unknown people. And here's one that I want to leave you with, and then we'll open it up to questions, is my slave memory. So I talk about this in my first book, and I talk about it in much greater detail in my recent book. And I was a slave, so I'll give you the summary first. I was a Carthaginian slave on a Carthaginian warship about 2,300 years ago, fighting the Roman Navy. Now, I was a slave. I had to do it, right? I was black. When my skin was so black, I was blue black. You know that phrase? You sometimes hear that. So I was so dark. I was African. And so what my first memory was of that experience was I saw myself on a piece of wreckage the size of like the door and floating on what I thought was the ocean because I couldn't see any land. And I could see my body lying there, and I saw how black, my skin color and so forth. And I was just, adrift in what I thought was the ocean. Later, I started having I'm using this as a teaching example for you, see how the breadcrumbs can kind of piece together over time. And this could happen over weeks, days, weeks, months, years, decades in some of the stories that I tell in the book. Decades it pieces together over long periods of time where I'll only get pieces and then I'll get more pieces and more pieces, but over sometimes 20, 30, 40 years. So in this one, it probably came together over a 2-year period, little by little. But I'm on this wreckage, I'm almost dying. And the reason I talk about it, because it's the most profound experience that I've had that's been meaningful for me as Kelvin Chin, because it showed me that I could will myself to stay alive. It showed me the power of my mind over my body because I willed myself to stay alive and some fisherman or somebody came and picked me up. But I figured out through triangulating different factoids, like what kind of ship was it? I started seeing the ship. I started seeing ramming. Well, I know that's not a 1700 ship. It's not a recent ship. It's an old ship, right? And then I started seeing something come down onto our ship from another ship. And then I researched that and I realized that the Roman army had these things that they called corvuses, which was a ramp that came down, and the corvus was the bronze sharp part that would hook onto their boat. And then the Roman troops would run across and fight. So that's how I figured out that my knowingness somehow that it was a Carthaginian ship that I was on was accurate, because the Romans and the Carthaginians were fighting on the Mediterranean. I didn't realize it was Mediterranean. I thought it was the ocean, but then I realized Mediterranean's huge. If you don't know that, you can't see the shores a lot of times. So that's that experience. But the key takeaway is it showed me the power of my mind. And I've used that. I've been laid off 5 times in this lifetime since I was 50 years old. And I've used that memory to power myself through the latest merger that I got dumped out on, right? Company gets bought, law firm merges, they already got 1 of me or 2 of me, I'm on the street. That's the thing. So I'm going to leave you with this last thought. We'll open this up. That's the thing about these memories. It's how can they inform me today? That's how I look at it from a practical lens standpoint, right? How can they inform me about who I am today to help me live my life? Because we're always in the continual present. I don't look back and like pine away for it or reminisce. It's like, who cares? And the characters that you'll see we talk about in my book who are known, again, who cares? You don't have to believe it. It doesn't matter. The point of mentioning some of the more known historical figures that I seem to have been is the personality traits, is to look at Kelvin Chin's personality. Now, a lot of you know my personality. And then when you look at my personality that you know that I still have, and you match that up with some of these other historically known characters, personalities, you'll see that it's that there's a match there. It's unusual. So that's my point of our personalities continuing, and that's how you can kind of connect the dots. All right. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is to know more about ourselves, because if we know more about ourselves, then our desires, our thoughts, and our actions and behavior are going to be more aligned. And the more alignment we have with that, what do we have? More success in life. And we have happiness. Thank you. That's what happiness is, right? Is an alignment of our desires, our thoughts, our actions, and our behavior, right? That's what I promote. Okay. Thank you. Oh, questions. Anything about anything, or you can ask, that stuff I didn't talk about. Yeah.
What about people throughout history that have committed crime, either theft or murder? I mean, did you get any insight about what becomes of them over time? Or do they like experience like a retribution or something?
I'll repeat it. Yeah, I'm gonna repeat all the questions. So what happens to people who've done bad stuff, basically? Did they learn from it? Is there any retribution, or what's the consequences? The bottom line, right? So first of all, yes, there are consequences to our actions, right? Always consequences to one's actions. We know that from our own life experiences. This is not something that's very esoteric. The question people usually wonder is what happens after they die? Are there consequences? And my experience is that there is no such thing as a structural place of hell. Notice the languaging. I am very specific about language choice that I use because I want to be very clear about conceptual ideas that I am talking about and teaching. No structural place of hell. Could you create a hell for yourself after you biologically die in heaven? Yes. How many people know anybody who's created a hell on earth for themselves? Right? Yeah. So that can happen. But that's why I use the word structural. That's what I mean. There's not a place that everybody has to go because they did bad stuff. Right? But are there consequences? Absolutely. Because you know who never forgets? Whoever you help or whoever you hurt. Right? They remember the good stuff you did. People will remember the good stuff you did with them, and people will remember the bad stuff. And they never forget. There's no such thing as forgiving and forgetting. I don't know who made that up, but it's not right. It's not accurate. They may have meant forgive and move forward. Okay, well, let's use correct English. Forgive and move forward. That's the correct English. Not forget. You don't forget. Okay, and that means on the other side too. That's my experience. You don't forget on the other side. So are there consequences? Yes. So do unto others, as they say, right? There's power in that. Okay. So, but no structural place that everybody has to go to for eternity and this and that. That's made up by humans and so forth, and it's not made up by Christians either. You look historically into the history of hell. It goes back 6,000 years, long before. Is that me paying in this thing? Hopefully, I'll be careful. Maybe I'm gesticulating too strongly. Start talking about hell, to get you going. But anyway, it's not accurate. There's no must go to a place and suffer kind of a thing. But you could be placed in suffering by the person who you hurt because they're not going to forget. So there's consequences to one's actions. Yeah. To help? Do you have a question too?
Yeah. As I get older, I struggle with religion and spirituality. I am not religious, I am spiritual. And having lost somebody very close to me, several people, I look at what we're taught and it doesn't fit. So that person whose body is left behind and they are an energy. And if you look at physics, energy is not created. It exists and it goes on. Does it then become, does their energy become a reincarnation? Does it divide into different people?
So there's a lot of pieces to your question. So I'll repeat. So basically, Sue is asking, somebody dies, what happens to them? Does their energy, if their energy continues, does it split up? Can it come back? And how does it come back? And this and that, basically, right? So there's all different pieces. Okay. So when somebody dies, my heart goes out to you for the loss of your loved one too, just as an aside here. It's terrible. I help a lot of people who've lost children, parents, grandparents, and so forth and so on. Bottom line is, the energy continues. It's, as I said earlier, it's identifiable. What I mean by that, they don't merge into some cosmic soup of energy. Okay. They retain their individuality and personality. My experience is it continues for at least 6,000 years so far for me. And my logic tells me that we're around for eternity. Eternity means no beginning, no end, right? It's not exactly what Woody Allen said. You know the Woody Allen joke about eternity. Woody Allen said, eternities are really, really, really long time, especially near the end. No, it's there. The point is, there is no end. Those people are not getting the joke. There is no end to eternity. That's the point. So does the energy split up though? No, my experience is no, that the soul, that's what we're referring to as energy here, this continuum, we would call it soul or spirit or consciousness, is what I call sovereign. I use that phrase sovereign in my writing and in my teaching. Sovereign means it doesn't split up. It's like sovereign is usually used in a political way, but it's like, well, we got the language and our culture and the border and this is where the border and the lines are and all that stuff. I'm using it more spiritually, which sovereign minds, consciousness, our soul is sovereign. Nobody can make decisions that you don't want to make. They can influence you. And lots of people influence, us all the time. Mr. Alberta like to influence us in Vandal all the time, right? Now, hopefully it's a positive influence, but but people can influence, it's just choices. He'll tell you all kinds of stories of people, of students of his who chose not to listen to him because they always have free will choice. Every mind does, right? They're sovereign unit. About coming back, you can come back if you want to, you don't have to. So some schools, you'll hear these spiritual teachers talk about, you got to come back and you have to fix that. You got to learn a lesson, or this is the earth is a school and da. To me, that's like, so again, I briefly mentioned that in 1986, I started opening up to the other side. I've had probably, so that's not me, I'm not paying anything. I did not do anything there. There's that, I had communication with hundreds, maybe thousands of different angelic types between 1986 and, to present. But the thing is, you want to take this off and I'll hold it. Let me just take that off, unclip it, and I'll hold it.
Oh, I dropped it. Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. So I'll just hold this like this. So that way, if we hear that banging, we know it's not me. So, all right. So the point is that there are a lot of beings on the other side who might want you to follow them because they have a little bit of a religious kind of bent in their own minds. And I'm not saying this is true for all angels, but some of them who I've been contacted with basically wanted me to kind of sell their kind of thinking. And I'm like, no, I'm thinking about this my own way. I'm figuring this out. And I teach my students how to figure it out themselves, not to even follow me. So I'm not going to follow you and your thinking, right? So there is that. So I just say that to you, not to scare you, but just to make you alert to, don't blindly follow what anybody says, including Kelvin Chin, right? So it's just use your own thinking on that. So you can come back whenever you want, but you don't have to. Right? And you can stay on the other side for as long as you want. And it's kind of like Vacationville on the other side. It really is. It's like R&R. Because think about it. You don't have a biological body. You don't have to feed it. That means you don't have to work. You don't have to clothe it. You don't have to roof over it. Nothing, right? It's chill time. Pretty easy. And your energy, if you think about it, we talk about it, your light, your energy, that means you think something and you can create the beach and you just go to the beach. Literally. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. First
Mike.
of all, thanks for a great talk.
Yeah, Mike, yeah.
Two good questions. First, if you don't want to go back to your 2021 book.
Sure, go ahead.
The great book. You have a section in there on meditation. And one thing I think that's difficult, quite for me, for a lot of people, it's kind of clearing the mind. So I'd ask if you could talk about that for a minute. And secondly, on a less serious note, you mentioned heaven, and you experienced that. As a baseball fan, I gotta ask, is there a field of dreams? It cites on the Red Sox pitching staff next year.
Yeah, it cites on the Red Sox pitching staff. Is there a field of heaven? That's great. Yeah. So the bottom line on that is there a field of heaven? If you want there to be one, you can create, because I literally mean this, your mind can create stuff on the other side because your energy and now you're not creating some physical, but you could say it's physical. I mean, if you talk to a physicist, they'll say, yeah, There's a form to it and therefore it's physical, but I mean, not physical in the way that most of us lay people are thinking about physical. It's not hard, all that stuff, dense.
I didn't mean to digress with that second.
But no, but the first one in terms of meditation, so Mike was asking about what about this notion in meditation of clearing the mind? And you hear that a lot. And I tell my students that you do not need to clear your mind. In fact, it's about allowing the mind to experience itself in whatever way it is at that moment. That's an underlying principle. That's not the technique that I teach. You overlay on top of that attitude and principle a specific technique that I teach and how to do that. But the bottom line is there are I've been thinking, you can kind of tell this guy thinks a lot, right? So I've been thinking about this a lot, and after about 20 years, maybe sometime in the 1990s, after thinking about it for 20 years or so, I distilled it down to one sentence for why there's so many meditation techniques that involve controlling the mind or clearing the mind or manipulating, directing the mind, stare at this candle, think about this thought, look at this mandala, whatever it is, okay? And this is the one sentence. It's taking a description of the result that you're looking for to be a means to get there. That's wrong, right? Makes no sense. You want to be in the Super Bowl. You don't go take the team and go fly to wherever, I'm not sure where the next Super Bowl is going to be next February, but you don't fly the team there and show them, oh, the locker room, oh, this is where the Super Bowl is going to be, oh, look at the this and that, and whatever. No, you get in the weight room, when you get the team in the weight room and you get them and you figure out plays and you figure out strategies, blah, 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 blah. That's how you get from point A to point B. You don't just describe point B over and over and over again where you want to be, right? Does that make sense? But if those of you who've dabbled in any other meditation techniques, you'll find that that tends to be the theme. Oh, just feel relaxed. Well, what does that mean? Okay, great. I want to feel relaxed,
right.
But how do I get there? That's a description. That's a great description of point B. Feel expanded, just expand, feel like connected with everything in the universe. Those are all descriptions of point B. That's not the path to get there, right? So teaching how to the path to get there is the key. Clearing them and clearing the mind is a common misunderstanding. You do not. So people wonder, let me say it to you this way. That people know I've been meditating for 52 years. They probably, they incorrectly think, oh, so you meditate, you're probably not thinking any thoughts during your meditation, right? No, it's not about how many thoughts you're thinking. It's about the level of inner peace and quietness you have there along with the thinking. Mark and I were talking about this the other day. Now that's very difficult for most people to wrap their minds around, because for most people, their mind is so that they cannot fathom what that means, is that to have thoughts along with quietness at the same time. But that, if you're meditating correctly and easily, say correctly to me means easily and effortlessly without concentration, without trying to clear the mind, without trying to control the mind, that's where you get to. Well, gee, if you look at any of the meditation books, that's what they all are describing as point B. But that's how you get there, right? Not by just imagining yourself in point B all the time. Does that make sense? Yeah, so other questions? Yes.
You described at least your early past life experience as being unintentional and spontaneous. Do you think that you were more receptive because of your meditation? And also in later experiences, is there something that you did to encourage more experiences, and how likely are people to experience that, or is there something that they can do?
Good question. So the question is, my past life experiences and so forth, I talked about how they just spontaneously happened to me, and the question was essentially, is there anything you can do to speed that up, right? So the short answer is, I think yes. I think there's several things. One is technique-wise and one is attitude-wise, okay? So from a technique standpoint, expanding our conscious capacity, finding something that works to expand your conscious capacity outside of what those of you who've read my purple book, or you've taken many of my classes, you hear me, or if you see me on any podcast interviews on my YouTube channel, you'll see me talking about this 8-inch bucket part of our mind. which is the psychology professor who's, I borrowed this analogy from. He would talk about this little 8-inch bucket with 10, 15 ping pong balls. Those are like your thoughts and emotions bouncing in and out. He said, no, that's not your whole mind. You guys, he's talking to one of my students who was a graduate student in this class. That's how I heard about this. He said, you guys, no, that's not your mind. Your mind is huge. It's this huge football stadium. That's your mind, but you don't know it because there's no lights on. And there's this little desk lamp on the 50-yard line with this over this little bucket, and you think that's it. So how do we expand our conscious capacity outside? So the 8-inch bucket part of our mind is the part that's waving this guy up here waving his hand around or holding the mic. I'm focusing on holding the mic in a certain position. It's the mind that directs. It's the part of your mind that drives the car down the street. Look through the windshield, put your foot on the gas pedal and the brake. Put your stand, don't bump into the baby carriage, that part of your mind is the directing important part of your mind. But his point, the psychology professor's point is, that's not all your mind. That's an important part of your mind, but not all of it. And in meditation, not the important part of your mind. You want to be out of the bucket, right? And so by getting out of the bucket and expanding the conscious capacity, now you have more of your mind that's conscious and usable. So that's going to help with whether it's past lives or whether it's contacting dead loved ones if one wants to, or whatever it is, okay? The other thing is, people ask me, they'll sometimes frame the question this way to me, how come why do you think your memory is kind of opened up? So I think it is two things that I got going for me that I can encourage you to work on for yourself, okay? I don't know you, but whatever, it's just, so this is not a statement about you personally, but for me, so let me self-reflect. Two things. One is no fear of death, and the other is no fear of embarrassment. No fear of death. I think those are two big ones to prevent people, because if you have a fear of death and dying, then you're going to block, right? And if you have a fear of embarrassment, you're not going to open up to stupid stuff that you've done. And you'll read some stupid stuff that I've done in this book here, okay? I put it out there. And I mean, I'll tell you how far and give you an illustration of how I put it out. I proofread the book. I don't know, I didn't count exactly, but somewhere 6 to 8 times I proofread the book. And then my buddy who was a mergers and acquisitions lawyer, a real one, who did like, I can't remember, $200 billion worth of deals in his career, legal career. So my point of saying, he's very, very careful, right, about documents. He proofread it another 6, 8 times. Every time I proofread my book, I was crying. And it was just like, I didn't anticipate this. It was like digging up old stuff in me. I mean, going back 6,000 years, some stuff that was very emotional. But I'm not afraid of that. I don't care about people finding out about that stuff about me if it can help other people, because I'm intact inside. I'm intact. I think every time I say a word that has a pop to it, intact. I'm gonna move it away. That's why you see these singers on stage, not that I've ever, but like they move the microphone away. They move the microphone away, they're probably doing that. Anyway, so me, the inexperienced one. So I feel, seriously, I feel confident inside about who I am. And if somebody doesn't believe what they say and they think I'm crazy, it's like, yeah, whatever. It's helped me. And that's what matters to me, is only what matters to me is has it helped me? And that's why I suggest that we all look at our lives. It's tough. I understand it. I get it. I'm not perfect and nobody's perfect. We're all a little sensitive sometimes. And some of us, who you are more, I don't know, but I'm just saying, we're different. There's a spectrum. Some people are very sensitive to what other people think about them. I tend to be more on the other end of the spectrum. It's like, yeah, whatever. But they're going to think whatever they think. I can't control that. So I think those are a couple of big things, right? No fear of embarrassment, no fear of death, and then expanding our conscious capacity. Other question? Yes.
2 questions. First one, in all of your past life recollections, have you ever come back to school?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
related to
Yeah.
that, you
I talk about that in the book. Yep. Yeah.
You had sort of said that on the other side, you can come back if you want. I'm just curious, can you choose how you come back, as whom, with whom?
It's a great question. So the first question was, have I ever been a female, just in case it wasn't picked up by the recording. Yes, and it's in my book, the experience. It's not a lot of memory, but it's very visceral memory, and I'll just leave it at that. You read it. And then, can you choose how you want to come back? Is the second part of the question. Can you choose how you come back and who with to come back? The short answer is yes and yes. So I've come back with a number of people this lifetime who I'm aware of. 2 people I'm very close with, my 2 children. So my son was with me in the 1800s when we were Lakota, and he was with me, getting a little emotional. He was with me when we both died within probably 5 or 10 minutes of each other, got shot. And this is all recorded, etc. And my daughter has been my daughter at least once or twice, other times, and my sister, and I talk about those in my book. And it's very interesting, the sister lifetime that my daughter currently has, because the quick short anecdote on it, you can read the longer version there, but I can't remember the year, but I put the year in there because I asked her, when did this happen, honey? Anyway, she's 29 years old now, and my son's 35. But she was at San Francisco State University at the time this happened. And I would be talking to you or one of my business clients or whatever, and they say, hey, you got any kids? And I say, yeah, I got my daughters at San Francisco. She's a dance major and this and that. And blah, 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 blah. Yeah, my sister's a dance. I mean, not my sister. I mean, my daughter is a dance major. I would say that probably was off and on. I would slip and say that for at least 6 years, 7 years. I don't know. I wasn't counting. But then for whatever reason, I never said anything to her. For whatever reason, I called her up because I was going to go see a dance recital that she was doing in San Francisco State. I called her up and I said, honey, I just got off the phone with somebody. And this really weird thing happened. And it happens every once in a while. And then I told her that story. And she goes, Dad, that's really weird because I call you my brother sometimes. Like my brother teaches meditation. And it's like, what's that? And she said, yeah, I've been doing that since high school. It's like for years. It's been going on for 5, 6 years or something. And so who knows? These are little data points. These are not, there's nothing provable about all this, But then we have had other data points that have come in, and I talk about how these data points can point in a certain direction, start giving you some direction, and then you can kind of connect the dots. But yeah, so soul groups, sometimes people call that, right? Friends, people you tend to gravitate with. You may change relationships in that example, right? Or you could keep the same relationship. It depends, whatever. Yeah. And you can choose before you come in. You choose before you come in. Yes.
So, I don't want to be really bad, but just a couple of things I had.
Yep.
Questioning.
Yep.
First of all, when we were talking about what kind of bad people, what about really bad people? They were styling and pulled pot and all those people, and they thought what they were doing was fight, but it was murder. It's just millions of people.
Yeah.
And second of all, but this is too much.
That's good.
Well, why do some, like, if you say that you would like choose to go back, why would somebody choose to go back as an abused woman in Afghanistan, or a starving family, women starving family in Africa?
Yeah.
What's this?
Right. Okay. So remember your second one. Let me answer the first one. You might need to ask me again, because the first one, what about Hitler? The question was, what about really bad people like Hitler and these really bad people who've done horrific stuff to humanity, et cetera, et cetera. There's consequences to everybody's actions, like I said, but there's not a place they go to. So everybody who they hurt, like I said, and in some of those people's case, we're talking millions and millions of people. Remember, they do not forget. You run into people in a future lifetime, that person, any of those people you listed, there could be consequences, because people are not going to be all lovey-dovey necessarily when they see them, right? And understandably so. But there's not a structural place. That's why I say, can somebody create a hell for somebody? Yes. But it's not a structural, it's not place, thou shalt have to go there because you did this. There's no let me say it to you this way, there's no cosmic accounting system. in the universe that's keeping track of who's naughty and who's nice, right? There's no like cosmic Santa Claus that's going, right? It's not happening. Right? But I say that jokingly, but seriously, because a lot of people, if you don't know, there's hundreds of millions of Hindus who are worried about mountains of karma, which is that, right? They've done so many bad things. I'm never going to be able to get out from under this huge mountain for millions of lifetimes. And so I'm the decreased fear guy, right? I'm the anti-anxiety, anti-fear guy. That's not accurate, okay? But there are consequences. Now, what the second part was,
The second part is, if we had a choice, like after that.
why would you choose to go into, Yeah. right? Why would you choose, the question is, why would you choose, if you have choice, why would you choose to go into a terrible life situation on Earth? Why would you do that? Well, first of all, you probably wouldn't consciously choose to do that, number one. That's the first part of the answer. A sub part of that first part is that not everybody is really thoughtful about the choices they make, right? How many people do you know walk through the supermarket, just look around, walk through Costco, whatever, you look around, how many people are really, you think, are planning out their lives, right? It's a small fraction, don't you think, right? Most people are just opportunistic. This is happening. Okay, I got that. This job, that job. Okay, whatever in life. And so you got to realize that, yes, having the choice doesn't mean that everybody takes advantage of that. It's the tease, exactly. Thank you. It's the tease. Takes advantage of making those choices, but you have the choice. Right. I talked to one student of mine, and I mean this seriously. I won't name her name. What's that? How did that? I mean, I didn't do anything. That's her spirit guides yelling at me. But anyway, so no. So anyway, she said, why do you think? I said, Natasha, I don't know. You really like soft serve ice cream. Maybe that's why you came back. You know, she's like, you didn't really think much about it, but you got so bored on the other side and you really missed the soft serve ice cream because you're eating all this energy soft serve ice cream that really can't really taste, but it's like, looks kind of, I can kind of remember what it tastes like, but I really can't taste it. You wanted to go back and just boom. I just joked with her, but you know, that's possible, right? There's all kinds of reasons. Now, the other part, third part of this answer that people generally forget is that other people's free will choices are affecting our lives all the time, right? People think, oh, I have free will, I can make choices with it. But what about the other people's choices that they're making? And I'm not talking about just, we got 8 billion humans. What about the other trillion animals, the dogs, the cats, the horses, and the I don't know what's? Now, they're very indirectly affecting us. Very, 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 maybe very indirect, but there is effect, okay? And we forget that. We think, oh, I made a choice. I made a bad choice. Maybe you did. Maybe it was out of your control, is what I'm saying. Maybe there were other people, other minds. Again, that's why I use the phrase mind. They could be human minds, or they could be other not human minds. And you may not believe that your dog or cat has a mind. I think they do, right? And I have an animal lifetime in my book too, where I remember being an animal. Yeah. So conscious, aware, the whole thing. Okay. Look, I've had dogs and cats. I think they're more self-aware than some of the humans I know, right? People have experienced that, right? So, okay, does that help? Anything else before?